Welcome in, and thanks so much for joining me. In this episode, I'd like to talk a little bit about what lineage is, and specifically what lineage is in Buddhism, in the Buddhist traditions. And the reason I thought to do this is I think it's not something quite natural for many of us when we start out in Buddhism coming from a non-indigenous location, meaning we weren't born Buddhist. We don't come from an indigenous Buddhist culture like Tibet or Japan or something like that. And there's lots of foreign ideas we encounter that are also I don't think they're foreign to Western thought. They've just been lost in Western thought. And one of them is this concept of lineage. I will start with something positive, which is in relation to Western culture. Lineage did and does exist in Western culture. It's just been de-emphasized. So, for instance, one example is in European cultures, probably to this day they still have it, but maybe as European cultures enter diaspora in the United States and other places, we possibly lost connection to this. And this is the tradition of apprenticeship, right? Being an apprentice. And so this was quite common in Western culture, and maybe still is in some places, of, if you're learning to do a certain trade, you apprentice with a master for a certain amount of time. And then once you have become skilled at it, the master, and you decide, you work for them, and then you can start your own thing or whatever you're doing, and you keep doing your trade, and then eventually you apprentice others, right? So this idea of part of what lineage is, it's not all of what lineage is in Buddhism, but part of what lineage is, it exists in Western culture and did exist, but it's been de-emphasized, especially as sort of hyperindividualism has taken over, where we're less likely to feel comfortable relying on others and having that relationship. I guess you could probably say, from a Buddhist perspective, this idea of apprenticeship and lineage started in India, and you can still see it to this day when you want to take on a teacher-student relationship with someone, even if that's not a spiritual one. It could be for being your musical teacher or dance teacher. You're entering into a long-term exchange and relationship. There's an explicit knowledge of, like, okay, you're going to you value what this person has done with their life, what they've gained in their art or trade or spiritual practice, the mastery they've gained, and you're willing to sit with them. And sometimes in the spiritual realm, that might mean, you're not going to receive meditation instructions right away. You're going to, sweep their floor, and you're going to learn from them that way, right? So apprenticeship or being a student doesn't always mean getting direct instructions. It's sort of like, especially with Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma is a way of life. It's a way of being we transform into, and there's many ways. I think we learn more about that from a nonverbal language than actual verbal language. But of course, the teachings and the practices are also involved. So anyways, I'm starting there because I think that's something relatable to us. If we want to become a student of life, at some point, we need to rely on others who have also done the work. Doesn't mean that, we need to create some kind of, hyper hierarchy around that. No, but there's some healthy hierarchy of just understanding that someone might know more than us, and they might have actually mastered something. And if we want to master it ourselves, we can rely on them. And especially if they're a compassionate and wise person, they're going to be open to that in a way that's healthy and helpful and ultimately transformative for us. So in one way, Buddhist lineage functions as that, especially with our personal physical teachers. We meet them, and that's how we get exposed to the Dharma. I guess, quite a few of us, we might start with books and or YouTube videos or guided meditations. But at some point, if we want to go deeper into exploring our practice, we need some kind of a human teacher. Because again, what that involves is more than the words. We see a way of being. And along with that way of being, transmission starts to happen. And this is another part of what lineage is in Buddhism. It's a lineage of transmission. And ideally, it would be a lineage of transmission happening from one, not only someone who's mastered the words and the techniques, but they've actually become a master in the sense that they've realized the Dharma. They've completely freed themselves from suffering and its causes and are able to transmit that when they transmit the verbal teachings and or practices. And this lineage of transmission is what I guess you could say helps Buddhism to come alive. And that is passed on for most of us in a human lineage from person to person. We also have the transmission lineage, the lineage of like textual information and texts, which is also very important. But when it comes to human lineage, transmission is something we can't fake. It's not something we can get from, ChatGPT at this point, at least. It's not something we can get from a book, and we definitely can't get it from just learning a technique. It comes from a relationship with someone, right? A relationship we build, and of course, that's not something that we engage in with haste. It's built over time. We check the teacher for a while to see, well, do they actually have the mastery they need? And then, more importantly, we check ourselves. Are we a proper student? Are we a proper vessel? There's qualities of being a student. And a teacher who has mastery is also checking us. They're also looking, does a student have the capability to do this, to follow this, to actually have results in their practice? So, and again, this very much plays a role in Vajrayana lineages, but it does play a role in Mahayana and Sravakayana Buddhism as well. So it does cross over into all vehicles and lineages of Buddhism to some degree. And I like to think of lineage also as a stream of compassion and wisdom, as a stream of just like what's the kindest thing someone could do for us? Sure, they can, buy us a meal. They can help us out when we need. They can be a loving partner, all of that. But it really pales in comparison to the kindness of helping us to become free of suffering. Right? Like that's a totally different level. And so a lineage is actually a stream of beings who have transformed themselves, who have gained sort of unchanging realization, and pass that on through the kindest thing you can do for someone, the kind of kindness that's unrepayable, of teaching us how to be free, right? So of course, the lineage doesn't do it for you, but they help to evoke our own internal blessings. We would say sort of our Buddha nature, which is like a seed of awakening, is just there waiting to be watered and given sun. And the lineage is both our physical teachers as well as those teachers we can't see but who are awake and we can supplicate and receive blessings from. This does help to water the seed of our Buddha nature. It helps to bring it out, along with the study of Dharma and, of course, our meditation practice. But it's kind of one of these components where I think, I don't know about some of you who are watching or listening, but for me, this element of hyper-individualism affected me most of my life, because that's more or less the cultural milieu of the modern West. The implicit teaching is you are your own being and you're responsible for everything, more or less, and you can also do everything on your own. There's this kind of sense of that, and I'm not saying individuality isn't bad, but when that becomes hyper-individualism, we have a tough time relying on others, and we have a tough time relating to just a fundamental truth that the fundamental truth of interconnection, the fundamental truth that everything is connected and we're being influenced by things all the time. So we can seek out positive influence, and in Buddhism this comes in the form of lineage, right? Because of course we can study a text, but when we see the text embodied in another person who's realized the actual content, they actually realize it and have transformed their minds and conduct, has a much bigger impact than something written on a piece of paper. So So either way, when we have obstacles to this, for me, those obstacles have been related to more hyper individualism and to be honest, kind of pride, right? Because pride is a sneaky one. It's not like pride is not like, it's not always so obvious. It's not always this sense of, being puffed up and arrogant all the time. It sometimes is this sense of like, I can do it on my own. I don't need others. So it's like hyper individualism and pride kind of mixed together, right? And mingle. And this makes it difficult to open to lineage because lineage is also community. I use the word stream, but I also sometimes use the word community. It's a community of realized beings, right? That we're tapping into. We're also tapping into a community of practitioners who are on the path and working on their stuff, which is, I think, also valuable because we see people at various levels of development and we can kind of see ourselves somewhere in that, which is helpful, right? Because if everybody's a Buddha, it's difficult to relate to. So thankfully, at least in the Vajrayana lineages, we believe the Buddhas come in sometimes what looks like normal human forms because we can relate to them. We can have some kind of hope we can do it, right? So that's just sort of a takeaway question, that I'm working with myself, but also posing to you is sort of where might hyper-individualism and subtle forms of pride come in that block this process, right? That sort of, we're not able to genuinely tap into lineage. But of course, like on the other side of this, Buddhism is not talking about blind faith here or being naive. So our best form of security in this is learning the Dharma. Because if we learn the Dharma, even if that is from books and texts, we have a better chance of being able to more or less judge or make some kind of a conclusion of who is a worthy being, a worthy practitioner to be an apprentice of, essentially, right? So we don't just want to take anyone on. We have to check. And in order to know what we're looking for, we need to study the Dharma. So that's equally important, right? We're not functioning on blind faith here. We're not functioning on like cult-like behavior or, being a follower of someone. That can be its own trap, right? But if we're so stuck in our sort of hyper-individualism that we're not willing to connect and sort of receive and surrender to something, that can also help, that can also harm, that can also hurt our progress in meditation. So to sort of wrap this up, I view lineage as just like a really positive thing. I don't view it as like a hierarchy of control or religious domination or anything like that. Of course, it can get misused, and organized religion, once the more organized it becomes, it also takes on qualities of humanness and sort of what comes along with that. But either way, what we're looking for, we're not looking for sort of the how do you say it? We're not following necessarily the fallibilities. We're looking for the Dharma within lineage, within the lineage that exists in the mind streams of beings today practicing the Dharma, as well as that which is unseen. So I'm not going too much into that, but the unseen is just just because someone is not alive anymore doesn't mean we can't connect with their mind stream, with their enlightened mind. So we have all these kinds of practices in Vajrayana Buddhism. For instance, Guru Rinpoche behind me. We might supplicate Guru Rinpoche with the belief that his essence, his nature, is something we can tap into and we can get help from. This definitely goes more into the faith and religious department. So if that's a little too much for you, it's fine. But there is a whole science behind that, right? Once we get into it. So lineage also applies to that. And so, I see it as an incredibly positive thing because ultimately it's not about becoming a believer and follower, but it's also not about being, sort of completely self-reliant. There's a give in there. Of course, it's based on us practicing and taking responsibility for our practice and study and all of that. But there's this sense of connection and community we're tapping into. We usually use the word Jinlap to describe sort of what do we receive from transmission? We receive many things, but one of them is jinlap, which it doesn't really have a great translation. We use the word blessings, but that's sort of an awkward word in English. It's essentially like that which helps to uncover our Buddha nature. It sort of loosens it, right? And not because they're doing the work for us. It's merely our mind, based on that interdependence of supplication, of devotion, starts to open to new spaces of its own reality. So, just like anything, like, if it's a sunny day, that affects our mind. If it's raining all day, that also affects our mind. So this is the same thing. When we supplicate and interact with lineage, both seen and unseen, it affects our mind. And in this sense, if something is reflecting 24/7 awakened nature, it's going to have an influence on us. It's just like something else would, right? Just like anything would. So I don't know. So I think there is a practical way to look at it too. It's not all based on sort of esoteric faith. There is a science to it, yeah? So I think I'll leave it here. And, this is merely just, talking about the tip of the iceberg of lineage, because it's a big, big topic. You can obviously read more about it from great masters who write on this. And I thought, for me, the one of the best ways to sort of connect to it too is reading biographies of past masters. So there's wonderful translations now of sort of like you can access books on the complete, the biographies of the Nyingma lineage, all the masters who are in the Nyingma lineage, or the Kagyu lineages, or Gelug, or whatever, or Sakya in the Tibetan traditions. There's also great biographies of Theravadan teachers. These are so helpful to read because they let us know sort of the community, what's the community we're tapping into? Who were they? Who are they? And also some of these stories are just very inspiring. Some of them are kind of more than human, and some of them are very human, and help us to not only understand the Dharma more, but to feel more of a connection with what we're doing. Because it's not just a technique. It's not just, something cold on a page. It's alive and living and, very much active in the world. Another thing I talked about in another video is pilgrimage. When we go to sacred places of past masters, we tap into that in just a very real way, just like you would in any place. You go somewhere where, for instance, Padmasambhava practiced and studied and, engaged in a certain activity of liberation and awakening beings. And you feel that there. You connect to it. You taste the place. You smell the place. You feel it. And even though it's probably much different than 1,000 years ago, still, there's some thread, there's some connection. So that's really helpful too for making it alive. So it's not just stories or sort of fantasies. We were connecting, with our feet on the ground, literally. So, sorry, I have a bit more to say, but as I said, there's much more to say on lineage. So I encourage you to dive deeper. If there's anything you want to share, feel free to comment here in YouTube. If you're listening to my podcast through its audio version, you can always reach out to me at scotttusa.com. Thanks so much. I hope this is helpful for just some reflection to deepen your practice and connection to the Buddha Dharma. Okay, thanks so much. Take care.